Sorry, we popped on a little bit late, but we're going to hop into it. We're going to have an excellent conversation today. Welcome to the first episode of a three-part series we're having called the AfroEcology Live Series. I'm your host this evening. My name is Miniya Ali. I'm the Just Transition Specialist here at Imagine Black. And I am here today with Axcelle Campana. Axcelle is the Senior Environmental Justice Practitioner at Knot Studio and has an incredibly impressive rap sheet of environmental justice work, which we'll get into. But before we get started, we want to give you guys some time to send us some likes and engagement in the chat. Feel free to place any questions you have for Axcelle into the chat, and we'll try to make time for that at the end. We have a pretty juicy conversation today, so we will try our best to make time for any questions. So yeah, let's get into it. Could you introduce yourself? How would you describe the work that you do?
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate, I can be long-winded, so feel free to cut me off and interrupt me. I'm not going to be offended.
For sure.
And I'll let you know if I want to finish my thought.
Yeah.
So anyhow, my name is Axcelle Campana. I do practice environmental justice at a small design firm and planning firm called Knot Studio.
Yes.
And we think of ourselves as change agents, placemakers, and wayfinders who are trying to improve the environment and help drive progress through kind of environmental action. But myself, my background is strongly in geography, kind of organizational and community psychology, and I see my work as at the intersection of data science, system science, and also like participatory research. And yeah. I have my notes here also because I think my goal ultimately is to kind of help community and also government find win-win solutions to kind of wicked, sticky problems, especially those that are involving kind of inequality and injustice.
Yeah, definitely. Are you a native Portlander, or where are you from, and how does where you're from shape the work that you do?
Yeah. So no, I'm not from Portland. I'm actually a long-term transplant.
Okay, cool. Me
So,
too.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
nice. So yeah, I'm from Southern Texas, from San Antonio.
Nice.
But I grew up in Georgia,
Okay.
and so kind of my experience is definitely strongly influenced by growing up in the South, and then moving through San Antonio, which has a very different culture. It's a majority Latino city. Um, and then that being also my homeland, so where my mom is a dark-skinned Black woman, my dad is Tejano, so being strongly from Texas in its historical context. Yeah, one way that actually I don't have any notes about that. One way that where I'm from influences kind of my experience or how I got to into my work is actually kind of a side story about when I was in undergrad. I was in a political policy class. In this political policy class, we looked at a map that said about toxics. It was some EPA toxics map, and it was strange as I was the only Black person in the class, and I was the only person who had toxics near my childhood home.
Wow.
And so it was like a flagging moment to be like, that's strange and anecdotal. But my environmental justice journey is something might get into in a minute, but that actually strongly influences, I think, how I interact my career. But in the city itself, my sense of community has been difficult to come by, and it's been hard earned. Being a transplant, I think.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to that. I'm also a fellow Southerner from Alabama, Birmingham specifically, and so that definitely hits home as far as the South, and especially the toxins influencing where and how you get into this work. So let's get into some data questions.
Okay.
Specifically.
Might have to get my notes up.
Yeah, feel free to pick up the notes. But in the Afroecology work that we do, we're starting to discover that data, and especially data pertaining to what Black folks in Portland go through in terms of environmental issues can be a little bit inaccessible. And so this is why we like to have the series, because we want to start getting people warmed up to engaging with environmental data, so it doesn't really seem like such a challenge, right? So what is geospatial data, and can you explain the importance of understanding it, especially when it comes to environmental issues?
Yeah, for sure. I actually really liked that question and did write some specific notes on it, just right there on the front page.
Awesome.
So, okay, geospatial data is data that's related to location.
Okay.
It's like it has a location associated with it. And it can be environmental, demographic, health data, ecological data, economic data. Examples can be like where are certain diverse like kinds of trees in the
Yeah.
city of Portland, or where are like folks who have a where's the prevalence of asthma most concentrated in the city,
Mm.
um, or disability. Yeah. And that can also be an economic example might be like where are people most housing burdened
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
housing cost burdened.
Awesome.
So yeah, ultimately it helps us ask where questions.
Mm.
Where are people impacted by climate change, flooding, and heat? Where are resources concentrated relative to those in need? And where do ecological habitats connect?
Yeah. Yeah.
And ultimately, where questions reveal patterns and relationships. For example, the overlap between race and environmental burdens.
Mm.
And they're really essential for understanding social and environmental issues.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Awesome. This sort of leads into the next question. So in your bio, you mentioned that you like to rectify the wicked problems rooted in historical and present day discrimination and marginalization and cycles of violence. And I found that really, really intriguing. And I was wondering, what are some of the wicked problems that Black folks face, and are there any Portland specific ones that you can think of that we should be aware of?
Mm. Yeah. So in general, there's a series of in my work, I look a lot at these wicked problems from a systems science perspective, and so there are a lot of um, kind of reinforcing feedback loops
Right.
that keep um, folks in cycles of poverty, um, and I think in particularly Black folks in cycles of poverty. And so this is something both from an experiential perspective of growing up, like in various different economic positions, and
Mm.
then also studying it as well. So some things I would describe is uh, kind of economic mobility.
Okay.
And so on one hand, while average incomes for Black folks have increased, you know, and this is actually the one I'm citing right now is based on a study by Raj Chetty at Harvard University,
Mm-hmm.
looking at cohorts between 1978 and 1992.
Oh, okay.
So, granted, like between 1992 and now, there's a lot that's happened,
Yes.
but in that time period, in the it like average income for Black folks actually increased, but the income gap between white and Black was still, on average income was still 70%.
Oh, wow.
So it went from 88% to 70%.
Okay.
Um, but the mobility for Black folks, economic mobility, has changed very little. And so Black children still have consistently lower upward mobility than white children. And actually, I think a really cool like visualization for this is actually a study that was published in 2019 by Fabian Vetter and Alexandra Killewald, called the Intergenerational Wealth, Mobility, and Racial Inequality Study. And basically, if I were going to summarize it, it shows very clearly visually that when you're Black, you're more likely to be born poor and stay poor. You're more likely to be born middle income and die poor, and you're more likely to be born wealthy and die poor.
Oh, wow.
And you're less likely to be born poor and reach middle or higher incomes.
That is sobering, incredibly sobering.
So then,
Yeah.
getting to Portland specifically,
Yeah.
there are kind of pervasive social and economic disparities. This is based on a 2014 report for the Coalition of Communities of Color.
Okay.
There's a report on the state of Black Oregon. So Black families, for example, earn less than half of the income of white families at that time, and Black child poverty was about 50%. So it's pretty. That's a lot of
Yeah.
that's a lot of children who
Yeah.
are experiencing poverty.
Hmm.
And if you combine it with the previous finding, like when you're Black, you're much more likely to just stay in that
Yeah.
position. So a second kind of stat is that systemic is like kind of looking at systemic inequalities in education and criminal justice. So more than half of Black youth in Oregon didn't complete high school on time, and Black youth are more than are 6.5 times more likely to be charged with a crime than white youth.
Okay.
And there are also some significant health disparities, and kind of that's impacted by historical displacement. So like we face some of the worst health outcomes, including infant mortality that's double that of the white population. And infant mortality is complex, right? Because it's not just, and also maternal mortality is complex. It's not just about your experience right now or where you are right now. It's also about where you've been generationally. That drives that particular outcome.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And then this may seem blatantly obvious to us because we are, people or professionals who do the work and the research about these issues. So we can understand how all those stats connect directly to the climate crisis and specifically how that affects like the Black community. But for those who may have a little bit more trouble making that connection, like how would you connect those stats to environmental justice for Black people? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, environmental justice itself is in part about, you know, the fact that areas that the fact that we end up in places and also in places that are environmentally undesirable,
Yes.
and also environmentally undesirable infrastructure is typically placed in near us.
Yeah.
And that's like as a variety of drivers. One of them being that is like historical, being like, well, and especially if you think about the South and like the origin of the environmental justice movement, for the reason that a lot of those infrastructures were located in Black communities was because that was where the undesirable or cheapest land was.
Yeah.
And also where the undesirable people are. Right?
Yeah.
So there's actually some really interesting study in my field that talks about, the idea that that Black people were seen as an undesirable environmental factor.
Yes. Yeah.
And if we think about kind of Oregon and its kind of racial exclusion laws, you can kind of like make those connections. But so since environmental justice is really about the fact that folks of color, low-income folks, actually also like people with disabilities, tend to be located near environmentally hazardous infrastructure. For us, it would be things like industry along the port or in the Sunrise Corridor or like along the Columbia River, etc. We tend to have more exposures.
Yeah.
And those exposures have a cumulative effect. And the cumulative effect includes higher cancer rates, higher rates of asthma, higher, you know, cardiac kind of
Cardiovascular. Yeah.
cardiovascular issues. But additionally, because we tend to live in communities that have been underinvested in or have aging infrastructure, our communities tend to be less walkable.
Yeah.
And less just like environmentally nice to be in.
Yeah.
Which means that we're less likely to be outside and be active.
Yeah.
Or be using active forms of transportation. And maybe it's not safe to do that. We're more likely to live near transportation areas. There's lots of transportation hazards.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm tying it all in.
Yeah.
As climate change is happening, getting it to climate justice.
Yeah.
We know that our region is likely to experience more variable weather, more like extreme weather, in particular extreme heat,
Yeah.
and also extreme rain events. And we are in areas that are the most vulnerable to as a population,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of heterogeneity also in the Black community, and
Yeah.
so wanting to acknowledge that, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Sure.
not living in an area that is probably the most vulnerable to heat.
Yeah.
But as a community, we tend to be in areas that are going to be the most impacted by urban heat island and
Yeah.
also flooding due to large rain events.
Definitely. So this sort of leads into the next question. And I think this is a big central part of Imagine Black's mission, is helping to help Black Oregonians imagine a future that is one where we can enjoy the rights and resources that we deserve. So what is your personal definition of environmental justice, and what does that look like here in Portland?
Yeah, for sure. So my definition is like first it's helpful to define justice.
Yeah.
And so I think justice is like a really hard concept
Very much
for
so.
a lot of people to get in the United States. And I think the reason for that is because we just like lack strong civics education and like don't spend enough time like understanding social movements and like what it took to get to where we are. And so I could feel like I include myself in this like cohort of people that just did not have effective civics education.
Yeah.
And actually, there was a little uh, piece on NPR about civics education in the United States and in Oregon, and that has been like students literacy in civics has been going down
Yeah.
for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
So, anywho, justice, like maybe at a fifth grade level, it'd be like a fairness, a sense of fairness, but big, right?
Yeah.
Social, and also have being connected to um, the actions and the outcomes of institutions and of like groups of peoples, and yeah,
Mm.
on upon each other, not
Okay.
just individuals.
Yeah.
Um, but environmental justice then would be the fair distribution of environmental benefits and harms. So
Okay.
when we achieve environmental justice, we achieve people being able to live, work, and play in an environment that is healthy, where they can thrive, and they're not disproportionately burdened by the negative impacts of our extractive and ecologically destructive economy.
Yeah.
So that is an interesting thing, because like, can we have environmental justice if we indeed like are you know creating extreme environmental hazards, through weapons manufacturing, through big ag, through fossil fuel infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
AI is
yeah,
another
yeah. I
thing
mean,
now.
yeah, like excessive
Yeah.
energy,
Yeah.
kind of consumption through AI. Like, I don't think that I have a hard time fathoming that we can actually have environmental justice without first reconciling our relationship to the earth
Definitely.
and um, our like tendency to overconsume.
Definitely.
But I'll pause maybe and see if
Yeah.
you want
Yeah.
to.
No, definitely. I think that I forget who this person was, but I was watching a video of someone talking about one of the reasons why we don't have as much of, I guess, an inspiration amongst, people currently living on the planet to fight for the earth is because people aren't experiencing it. We're not picking berries, we're not going for walks, we're not, gardening as much as we should be. And it's hard to want to fight for something that you're not really engaging with that much because we're in buildings and we're driving cars. And so this is really, the work that we're doing here is sort of extracting one community from that global, population of people and really and trying to inspire people to really connect with the earth and to reconnect with the land, and to fall in love with it because to love something is to want to protect it. And a lot of people are not at that space where, especially Black people, where we can even engage with it. And so figuring out how we can break that barrier is really, really important. I looked a little bit into like some of the work that you do, but I definitely feel like you can explain it more than I can. But you were the 2022 winner for the prestigious Bullitt Environmental Prize. When you were doing your work on urban heat and forestry, what revelations shocked you? And I think this question sort of ties back to that connection that we were talking about before about like Black folks and I think environmental changes and how that affects us. Because particularly in Portland, one huge issue we have is lack of tree canopy, and there's a lot of work that's being done making the connection between um, trees and how beneficial it is to have trees in your neighborhood when you're walking. I think I read some study like people speed less down the street if the street is lined with trees as opposed to when it isn't. So yeah, the work on urban tree canopy and forestry is super interesting. And I'm just wondering, as you were doing your work, like what sort of things shocked you, or was there anything in particular that stood out in your research? Sorry, that was a lot.
No. I really appreciate it. You really struck a couple of like chords, and I think yeah, you brought up something that I hadn't thought about until just right now.
Yeah.
So, um, you know, I'm going to go into a couple of different areas, but the first one I want to go into is one I just had not thought about until you were talking right now, and it's about this stewardship,
Yeah.
right? And you said that people, when they're disconnected from land and from the earth and from the impacts on the earth, and there's not an ability to really like value the impact that we're having on it.
Yeah.
And furthermore, I think we're not only disconnected from the earth in urban places. I think we're disconnected from the larger ecosystem.
Yeah.
We're not able to like really fathom the like extinction crisis that we're in, and we're not able to like fully feel the loss of entire lines of or like entire species,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's like that loss I know is felt much more strongly for scientists that are like studying these species and who no longer can study them because they no longer exist.
Yeah.
But that said, something that came up in focus groups that I was running with the Black community about urban trees was, and this is not published because I like never published that. It didn't have enough focus groups to publish things.
Yeah.
I don't know. Science is weird.
Yeah.
So, but like it was this relationship between being able to establish a home and place and being able to live in a place and have a sense of community and stewardship, because what we talked about and was like probably one of the most novel connections, because in these conversations, right, we're talking about trees and I'm like, I don't know how much people want to talk about trees, but we can talk about anything as long as it's related to trees.
Yeah.
And through that openness, I would call it like a bounded openness, we came to some really interesting conclusions.
Okay.
One of them was, yeah, when people are displaced, they are no longer on their land. They also have a fragmented community, and the passing of generational knowledge from one group to the other about how to care for your trees, how to care for the land, what is this place like, what grows here, these kinds of things get lost. And there was a direct and indirect connection. So I'm giving you the direct one, but there's also this indirect connection of when you don't feel safe or don't feel like you belong in your community, you're less likely to like want to invest your time and energy into making it something better.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting one that it didn't surprise me, but it definitely expanded my understanding.
Yeah.
A couple of other places that are interesting is and I think is surprising is that, and it's also not surprising. If we think about like the mainstream environmental movement, there is a kind of ideology that is that the environment should be prioritized above all. In philosophy, absolutely, right? Like it's I used to sail and do environmental education, and we had like a saying which was like the way your ethics should be and the way you should drive your time and your energy, and it was shipmates and then self, right? So I believe in that, right? We are on the earth, we're a big floating ship. We have to take care of the earth first.
Yeah.
Then we can take care of each other, and then we can take care of our own, right? That's the way things should be.
Yes.
However, the ideology frequently is prioritizing environment over people at the expense of environment. And so that, because these things are tied together, right? People and the environment are tied together. So what I mean is that like there's this kind of green is always good ideology that runs through urban forestry. It runs through urban conservation, and I think it can miss the point that actually, especially when we bring equity into it, right? So that like for example, recently, like October 22nd, actually, like quite recently, the city of Portland adopted a new urban forestry plan, and it's an update to the equitable tree planting plan.
Yeah.
That was written in 2015, I think.
Yeah.
So this one's an update 10 years later. And it does a lot of awesome things, right? And it's like, so I'm going to list the awesome things it does.
Yeah.
It continues prioritizing planting areas that are low-income folks of color and have low tree canopy. It has a strong focus now, not just on planting, but also preservation and care, which is super important because in a lot of areas that have space for large form trees, we're losing those because they're getting cut down in areas that are ripe for development.
Yeah.
It is now, it has an intention to provide financial assistance and eventually have the city assume maintenance of street trees, which is critical because currently, if the city plants a tree, the property owner that's adjacent to it is responsible for the tree and all the financial costs associated with it. It continues to provide transparency and ongoing reporting. It focuses on stewardship and education, and it's also responsive, trying to be responsive to local context. So you have to do different strategies in different areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, what I find surprising in the field in general is that there's a lack of appetite for studying and mitigating potential harms from green infrastructure that could be caused, namely green gentrification, which has happened in this city, and also there's plenty of evidence to show that it can and likely will happen. Not right now, but in 20 years when those trees are mature and with all the accompanying investments that have to go along with it, like sidewalk improvements and curb cutouts, and that there's likely to be like impacts on how desirable that neighborhood is, and thus in an unregulated housing market on how expensive that land is and how expensive those houses are, how expensive it is to live there. So there is not in this current urban forestry plan any acknowledgement of the negative unintended potential for negative unintended impacts. There's no kind of appetite for even studying or continuing to monitor potential negative impacts as a result of tree planting programs. And I find that to be unacceptable. So that was surprising to me. And I even sit on a committee, right? That's a urban equitable urban tree canopy working group. PCEF is funding a lot of that work, a lot of the equitable tree canopy work. And while people are open to it, I think they don't know or are not able to or are willing to put the time and energy into really thinking through how we can resolve this problem as an entity that's just about planting trees.
Definitely.
Granted, it is bigger than urban forestry. There's other investments that are going to be coming from PBOT and are going to be coming from BES and are going to be coming, through other planning processes. And this is a bigger political problem. But the step of just acknowledging that you might be contributing to those harms and choosing to at least understand that, like, monitor data that would help you understand if you're leaning in that direction is like a bare minimum. So I was surprised by that.
Definitely. That's super interesting. I was going to ask
Sorry,
you,
that was a really long tangent.
No. You answered the second question, which was going to be, can you tell us more about just urban tree canopy and just like the logistics behind that? And yeah, I think that I've had a chance to talk to some of the folks at Urban Forestry just to get a sense of their program. I think they're doing is the yard tree giveaway program. They've partnered with us a couple times because they're trying to really diversify. Because I think last year when they did it, most of the people who were picking up the yard trees were like white people in affluent communities, and they were trying to figure out ways to connect just the diverse communities in Portland to the yard trees. But we were having conversations about like how like most people are in apartments, or like, you want to make sure people are like planting the tree in a way that when you come back in a year it doesn't die, so it's like making these programs efficient is something that's super important. And it's a semi good step that they're working with orgs like us so that we can have these conversations and bring feedback to them. But I definitely know that in general, just like the environmental spaces in general can sometimes seem a little bit inaccessible to Black folks, specifically what you were talking about earlier about like the ship and then the shipmates and then yourself. I think that sometimes that ideology can lack the accountability that we need to place specifically on just the system in general for creating a dynamic in which we have to be so extractive of the environment. And so sometimes it can remove the accountability, especially from just like colonialism and all those things that affect the way the environment is today.
Can I comment on that really quick?
Yeah,
I think that was actually a huge piece of what got me into environmental justice that I haven't really spoken about really before, which is that the mainstream environmental movement was so focused, rightfully so, on saving what was left, right? On saving what we have left, like the highest valuable habitat, for example, in the metro area. But like it had a hard time articulating and acknowledging the ways in which the larger economy was actually the the larger way in which we're living on the earth is the primary driver that's causing
Definitely.
those harms,
Yeah.
not the people that you don't want to walk in your park
Yeah.
because or
Yeah.
the people that you want to exclude from from the area.
Yeah.
Like they're not the ones causing the harm. They're so it's I had a hard time with that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And I think for me, one of the things was when you study different cultures, especially when you look back at, pre-colonial African cultures, we have a very different relationship to the land, or had a very different relationship to the land than our European counterparts. And I think those of us who live in the Western, those of us of African descent who live in the Western world, because we've lived in this under this dominant culture for so long, we've sort of adopted, I think, some of the cultural ways of looking at the earth that I think aren't really um, cultural to or specific to us. And so there's like a ways in which I think that, spirituality and just like the way in which African people looked at their relationship to the land was a lot different. And I think that that can also be a way for education, a point of education, looking at ancient African farming practices and how they sort of centered making sure that we're getting what we need from the land, but also protecting the soil and protecting the earth. I think that that is also something that's sort of left out of that conversation as well. That like, hey, like, there was a way in which, or a culture in which valued the earth in a different way, not a right or wrong way, but in a different way. And it's important to acknowledge that, especially post-colonialism, that people aren't really able to do that anymore because of colonialism and being severed from that cultural knowledge. Um, but to keep it moving forward, how do we stay focused and grounded given some of the environmental challenges ahead? It's going to be super important given
Mhm.
these all the cuts and things we're experiencing now.
Yeah, when I read your proposed list of questions, I think this was
Yeah,
one of my favorite questions.
yeah,
And the things that came, I was just speaking out loud to myself, how would I answer this question? And like the things that came up were so interesting. And so I
yeah,
want to share them with you. Okay,
yeah.
so the first one, okay, so how do we stay focused and grounded given the challenges that we have ahead?
Hmm.
And um, one of them, I think, is to speak your truth. Um, and I mean by that, to share your lived experience and to stay in touch with what it actually feels like to live in the place you live. Um, Another one is to continue learning, like continuous learning, and also listening to understand. Um, I guess I mean that the world's complex and the solutions that we need to come up with are going to need to be adaptive. And so if we get into a mindset that there, you know, are experts out there that are going to help us, like you might be surprised like how specialized
Yeah,
experts are and how they have one particular slice of of the um the kind of system, and they're not able to necessarily look at it as a whole. And also listening to understand is really focused on connecting with other people that you may feel like are disagreeing with you, and finding those places in between.
definitely.
Another one is to use data as an anchor point for telling stories.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think when we are able to um, clearly anchor our experience and what we're seeing in the world with data that's also showing those same things, I think that becomes a powerful story.
Okay.
Um, I have two more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So another one is to avoid overgeneralizations and
Mhm.
simplistic us versus them narratives.
Yes.
I think there is so much. One strategy we know of tyrants is to divide people, um, and so we can succumb to that especially when we are demonized
Hmm.
or like we are posed as the other,
Yeah.
which I think is happening right now at the federal level.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the narrative, the underlying kind of stereotype and narrative that's being driven is that implicitly and also explicitly is that actually there's several, but let me just talk about one
Yeah.
that relates to this. It's that we want some kind of handout or want something special or that we want to like be dominant over or to over white people.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
when
Fear
actually
of
what we want
retaliation.
is equity
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
opportunity and a shot,
Definitely.
right? And then the last thing is to remember that solutions require nuance and multiple perspectives. And so that kind of goes back to this. It's kind of goes back to this idea of resisting these overgeneralizations. And I think also our politics tend to drive us toward overgeneralizations.
Yeah.
And even if some kind of overarching meta narrative is true, you know, such as like meta narratives that talk about wealth distribution and that being a major problem that leads to various different outcomes in the public sector and also with us as individuals and communities. If we just say that by itself, it vastly oversimplifies the way that we need to act, the solution,
Yes.
and causes us to think about things like, how can we make it different right now?
Yes.
And like what, not really consider the negative consequences of those perhaps like more extreme or like sudden changes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely, I think sometimes when it comes to these issues, it's easy to take the extreme because I think that people think that that will almost microwave the solution for you when it's something that you need to actually take your time actually brainstorming with. And especially in the age of anti-intellectualism, trusting the experts, right? Trusting the people who are doing the data, who have the specific, are experts in that subject matter is going to be really, really important. I know as Black folks, we've got a hard history when it comes to just, science and trusting scientists. And there's a whole, history behind that. But really engaging with the data, and I think it's going to help. And especially, I think it's, us as academics, it's our duty to make it accessible, right? But also, it's important that people can, access that, but have that inform their worldview. But that's going to come with trust and trusting the experts. So that's also really important. And these last two questions are something that we're going to be asking all the guests. But what would you say are some simple ways that Black folks in Portland can start reconnecting to the land?
Can I take a step back really quick?
Yeah.
Because I think that last piece that you mentioned,
Yeah.
which was like the need to trust experts,
Yeah,
is really important.
definitely.
And there's a question that I know you skipped.
Oh, which one?
Oh, it was how do we make environmental data more accessible?
Oh, where was it?
I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah. No, that's a good one.
I think it's really important for this particular point because I just
Absolutely.
mentioned like, okay, well, we need to, use data as storytelling anchors, and we need to have continuous learning and not necessarily rely
Okay,
only
cool.
on experts.
Yeah.
Right. At the same time, we need to rely on
We
experts.
do. We
right?
cannot
So
fall
how do we
into
make data more
anti-intellectualism.
accessible? Well,
Yeah.
there's tons of data out there, and so I think like working on our data literacy by, you know, like reading studies, reading
Yes.
summaries of things, reading the highest level, whatever level we're at, starting somewhere, and increasing our own data literacy, and also encouraging data literacy by being better communicators, I think is one way to make it more accessible. And so that's helping people interpret and use data, but also I think we need more custom tools and effective, like I just said, science communicators.
Definitely.
So we need more people who are willing and able to use some relatively specialized skills, like to learn these skills that are hard to pick up, but easy once you have them to do a
Exactly.
lot of stuff with. And people are willing to be that bridge between kind of technical expertise and community knowledge by creating these ways of interacting with data. And the last thing is I think it's important to support citizen science and more decentralized data collection because there is already a lot of free data out there.
Yeah.
And so really the issue is there's not effective bridges between expert like data and the expert knowledge and data and like kind of bastions of data and everyday people. So okay.
Awesome.
Now I know you want me to answer this question. How can Black folks reconnect with the land?
Yes.
Is that okay if I just go forward with that?
Definitely.
So we have a little time. Okay.
Perfect.
So I would say go volunteer. Black Futures Farm is a great one. I know you have
Absolutely.
someone
Yes.
from Black Futures Farm coming over here.
Yes.
Growing gardens, like call out to like a Camilo Centeno because he keeps talking to me and telling me to do growing garden stuff. He's part of North Portland's growing gardens team.
Yeah.
Like they take volunteers, like they'll work in your neighborhood. I would say also ground on the earth, like where it feels safe to do so. And so, I mean, like grounding, is like a trend now these days. Like literally take your shoes off and go stand on some earth.
Yeah,
It's
literally ground
actually
yourself.
amazing as a like way of having a mindfulness practice and just like connecting with the source.
Yeah.
Um, so also, I think attending public land-centered cultural events, in particular with folks who have a ancestral and cultural connection
Hmm.
to this place,
Definitely.
is a way of connecting. And so a lot of powwows are in this are public, and so learn the protocols and go. And I know that Portland Harbor Community Coalition has a public
Hmm.
water ceremony
Hmm.
every year, maybe twice a year. That I recommend people go to. And yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, Black Futures Farm is an excellent way to reconnect. And also a quick plug, I'm going to put this to the camera, not that you can see it, but we've got the AfroEcology zine, which is the first edition of hopefully many editions that we've just published this past summer. Currently available at Third Eye Books, but we've got some more locations that we're working on right now to get it into. We've got fun little scavenger hunts, we've got recipes, we've got ways that you can connect to some of the orgs that Axcelle just mentioned, and we've got some accessible data in here too that is really fun. So check out the AfroEcology zine. I'm going to quickly run through just a few other fun things that Imagine Black. Oh, okay. We're going to quickly run through a couple of other things that Imagine Black's got going on. So this upcoming Saturday, we've got a kinfolk meeting from 12 to 1:30. We've got one happening in the office, but we've also got one happening online. The theme for this kinfolk meeting is going to be Black workers. So we're going to be talking about justice for Black workers in Oregon, creativity, all those things. We're going to have food, pizza, amazing music, and all that stuff. So if you're a kinfolk member, or you would like to become a kinfolk member, please feel free to message me on the Black Possibilities app and I can get you connected. We spoke about grounding a little bit earlier in this conversation. And right here in this space, every Wednesday, we actually have yin chair yoga sessions with Donna Sweeney from Yin Yoga Space. So it's from 12 to 12:30, and you can join at home in your chair if you're working from home and do some nice grounding yoga sessions on our app. And yeah, the next AfroEcology Live is going to be next Thursday, same time, same place, 5:30. We'll be talking to Lakita Lanford of Afro Village and getting into some of the work that she does. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you, Axcelle, for this awesome conversation. And yeah, we'll give you a copy of the zine.
Thank you.
It's for you.
I'm excited.
And yeah, that's a wrap.
At Imagine Black, we envision living in a city that loves Black people. We imagine a world where every Black person has the rights, resources, and recognition to be part of a thriving, resilient, and connected community. We are freedom dreamers. Now is the time to invest in Black liberation and self-determination. Your support is critical to this work. A donation to Imagine Black helps us maintain our capacity to affect change in the Black community. Your contributions can help us build Black voter power, advance the call to reimagine our public safety and criminal justice system, and push for a just transition from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. We all have a role to play in the movement for Black liberation. Go to imagineblack.org/donate. Please give generously. Together we will turn dreams into reality.